Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this live conversation on COVID safety. Somehow it is March of 2021, which means we've been having this conversation for an entire year. We have our masks ready, we have our hand sanitizer, we've been taking the proper precautions, but many of you have questions about situational safety. Some of you are looking to go on that date night. Others want to attend your son's baseball game as preseason gets underway. And some of you COVID brides out there are just fingers crossed for that wedding of your dreams. So today we are here to answer all of your questions. We're about to bring in Tim Bowers, our Vice President of Clinical Effectiveness here at ChristianaCare. And once we'll bring him in, we'll get started on your questions.
Hi, Tim. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Megan. Thanks for having me. It's great to be back a year later.
Right? The last time we had this conversation was over the summer, and I think it was incredibly helpful just to run through a lot of these situations. So let's start just with the basics. What should we be doing every single day to be COVID safe?
Yeah, so every single day, a lot of that actually hasn't changed. So it's wearing your mask if you're going to be around individuals that are not within your household or not within your immediate bubble, making sure that you're washing your hands regularly, that you're staying at least 6 feet away from others, especially when indoors, but also when outdoors as well. And then as soon as it's available, get your vaccination.
Great. Very important things to keep in mind every day. So before we get started on the situational questions, let me remind our viewers, if you have any questions, please submit them in the comments below. We have some that our team has put together, some that have been submitted ahead of time, but we are looking at the Facebook and keeping track of anything that you guys submit as well. So Tim, let's start with probably the most popular one right now, restaurants and dining. Over the summer, a lot of it was happening outside when the weather was warmer, so it was a no-brainer to be able to social distance maybe at a picnic in the park or at restaurants who had tables outside. How can we make sure we're being safe in this transitional period where a lot of that dining is happening inside?
The move away from restaurant dining really was the biggest departure for me and my family. That was one of the things that we enjoyed, I'll say probably a little too regularly in the before times. And now it becomes a risk assessment. So if you choose to go out dining, really, if you choose to participate with a restaurant, so the easiest way would be to use just takeaway, right? Take out, delivery, get that great food, but do it in the safety of your own home, in your own bubble. That's really the safest way you can do that. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum is you walk into a restaurant and it feels like it did before. It's a busy, very popular restaurant, and you don't feel like there's enough spacing or enough mask use. That would be on the highest end of your risk scale for COVID. And so, if you're going to go to a restaurant, go out to eat, kind of know what you're getting into. So a lot of the COVID practices, a lot of the prevention practices the restaurants are employing are available on their websites. You can call them and ask them. If you yourself are at high risk for complications due to COVID, I would definitely suggest doing that instead of getting out to the restaurant and then kind of making that decision based on what you're seeing there. You should kind of know that beforehand because it can really impact your health. It's something that we are moving back to slowly in my household, really places that we know that have that 6 feet where individuals are wearing masks if they're not actively eating or drinking. And for me, that's our safety level. If I see that, we can stay there and have a meal. If not, then maybe we pick up to go on the way out.
And what about other outdoor activities that some of these families may be looking to do? Today's a little cold, but hopefully it's getting warmer and warmer as the days go on. We're only a few weeks away from spring. So what can we do at playgrounds or at parks? Some families have been staying away from playgrounds because, there's probably potentially germs on that equipment on a good day. So how can we make sure that we're staying safe and especially kids are staying safe as they try to do some of that group play on the playgrounds?
Working in infection prevention, I try to turn that part of my brain off when we used to go to playgrounds, and we know that sunlight is a great disinfectant, but it doesn't kill everything. And so even before we knew kind of what we were getting into. Now with COVID, I'll say the same level of complexity exists. Where is it a really crowded playground? Is the playground in your neighborhood, or are you gonna have to travel far to a community that maybe you're not as familiar with? And then you also have to look at, how much COVID is being transmitted in your community. It feels, maybe because we're past all the snow and we're past the holidays, it feels like there's less transmission happening in the communities where we live. But really, we are still at the same level that we were right about the time of Thanksgiving, which was high at the time. So we need to make sure that we're keeping an eye on that. So If you choose to go to a playground, number one, outside is great. It is much better than inside as it relates to the transmission of COVID, but you still need that 6 feet. You still need masking for those that can wear it. It's not recommended for children under 2, or individuals that have a hard time breathing, that have a hard time either with COPD or heart failure or other comorbid conditions, other conditions that affect their health. They may not be able to wear the mask as long. So really trying to fit all that into your day out at a playground. It used to be nice and easy. You picked up the diaper bag or whatever bag you were bringing with you and you head out and you go, but now there's a lot more thought that has to go into it. So again, outside better than inside, making sure that you can bring your alcohol and hand sanitizer, or know that there's a way to wash your hands and wash your children's hands after touching all of that equipment. Probably was something we should have been doing before, but we definitely have to pay attention to that now.
I think a lot of people are realizing, we should have been doing a lot of that before. So even hopefully eventually when COVID kind of winds down and we're out doing more of these things, the hand sanitizer will definitely become a staple in all of our bags going forward for sure. So I know that you are a runner, you like to get out and bike and do things like that. How are you staying safe in your own neighborhood, even just walking the dog?
Exercise is really a big part of my life. And I will say that, COVID aside, if you've not exercised since the beginning of the pandemic, make sure you have a conversation with your primary care or the physician that knows you to make sure that you're healthy enough to have that exercise. It was a conversation I had with one of a fellow runner that has literally been doing other things other than exercising this whole pandemic. So make sure you get that out of the way if you've been less than active, and start slow. If you're running outside, if you're running, the safest place to do it is outside. Inside on a treadmill, it's a whole nother host of factors that I think we'll talk about in a little bit. But outside, if you're running on a very well established path with other individuals that are probably going to cross your path, have something that you can cover your mouth with, cover your face with. Run at a pace that you're able to make sure that covering can stay on your face, because the same rules apply. 6 feet as often as you possibly can, wearing a mask as often as you possibly can. But that you're doing it outside will add a layer of safety. All of these things add layers of safety so that way you can put more space between you and a potentially contagious COVID person with COVID.
So you mentioned running outside is, a safer bet than running inside on a treadmill, but many of the gyms are open with, restricted numbers, restricted hours potentially. If you are one of those people who is a, 6 a.m. runner on the treadmill at your gym, how can that person make sure that they're doing that as safely as possible?
Yeah, so I'm actually glad that the gyms are open. It's a big part of our mental health to make sure that we can get that exercise, and not everybody has the ability to exercise outside. And with that ice that we just had, it was probably just as dangerous to run outside as anywhere else. So important to make sure that we keep that up. For inside of a gym, there's a host of factors that you want to look at. You want to, is it a really small box? Are you really contained in this tiny small room with other people that are breathing heavily? I'm setting up a scenario that is not very good for you in terms of your risk to exposure to COVID. So making sure that it is a large space. If you're going to be running on the treadmill, that there are treadmills free between you and the next person. If you walk in and it's crowded and there's more people on the treadmill than you like, that little indicator in your head should tell you, maybe I don't run today, maybe I'll use the weights, maybe I'll go on an elliptical or do something else away from others. And again, a lot of this has to do with your personal risk. Are you relatively healthy? You don't have any breathing problems, are in very good shape? The likelihood that you're going to have a severe course of COVID is lower. It's not zero, but it is lower, as opposed to somebody who is exercising, later in life with some of these breathing problems and some of these heart problems that potentially could set you up for a rough course of COVID. So it all comes down to that, how risky is it if you get COVID that you're going to get really sick? And then what situations am I putting myself in? Again, the treadmills next to you should be open if you're going to do some really hard running, because the harder you breathe, the more likely it is to come through your mask if you're able to wear that mask. And everybody around you should be wearing masks too. That doesn't go away just because you're in the gym. And I'll say that there are individual clusters and individual outbreaks that have been associated with not masking in small rooms, cardiovascular training, circuit training, bicycles and ellipticals and things like that. They're all concentrated in a room because that's their that's your exercise routine. But in that particular case, the lack of distance, the lack of ventilation, and the lack of masking really, a lot of people got sick in those particular outbreaks.
So another way of exercise that is going to be very popular, especially going into the spring, sports, specifically kids sports, high school sports, college athletics. You know, the mask mandate is there. They're playing baseball with masks on, they're playing lacrosse with masks on, but you know, you're still potentially closer to 6 feet with many of these, especially the sports like soccer, when you're kind of on top of each other in specific situations. How can, you know, parents who are watching, or maybe even the athlete who's watching, make sure that before and after games, they're taking those proper extra precautions?
Yeah, I'm very glad to see that sports are starting again. And I'm also glad to see that the masking is really being enforced in terms of both from coaches and parents, and a lot of the messaging, the kids will follow what it is that we tell them to do. I know it doesn't always seem like that in the moment, but if your coach is saying that you know, we have to wear a mask when we're on the field or on the bench or whatever that rule is, and then the parents reinforce it, it really helps to have an individual, a student, or your child really follow that to the T. So if you're a parent that's going to a game, clearly wearing your mask whenever you're there, staying at least 6 feet apart as much as possible. For games, again, outdoor games are lower risk than indoor games. I can imagine a basketball, if you have a basketball court that is literally just the court and walls and one row of people, you know, the smaller the space ends up getting, the more likelihood you are to interact with somebody that could potentially have COVID. And so, you know, really understanding your surroundings and the way that things are playing out. And this isn't a one and done kind of thing. Even with the restaurants and with the gyms, you know, as your workout or as your meal progresses, if things start becoming a little less optimal than when you walked in, it gets a little bit more crowded. People are maybe now all of a sudden there's this group in there that's not wearing masks. It's okay to get out of there. If you're in a restaurant, pay your bill first. But you know, in general, make sure that you're feeling safe. Make sure that you're putting yourself in the best situation possible. I really can't wait to see some of my son's games, and I'll be doing so definitely with a mask, definitely spaced out as much as possible, even if I have to wear my glasses or get binoculars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and some, especially indoor, I know a lot of them had restrictions on the number of people who, you know, could go to the basketball games or the wrestling matches, but hopefully with those outdoor sports and a little bit more space, like a lot of the fall season, you'll be able to do that for sure. So on top of spring sports and just the spring in general and being outside, some people are, you know, thinking spring break. Maybe last year it was canceled. This year they're thinking, you know, maybe I can travel, maybe I can get away for a few days. What would you recommend if they do choose to travel, they keep in mind?
So travel, I remember trying to answer this question last year. We didn't know nearly as much as we do now. But travel is still not necessarily one of the safest things that you can do in terms of keeping yourself safe from COVID. It's probably the nicest way I can put that. It's allowed, you're able to do so, you're able to travel, but I would definitely recommend doing so safely. If you're going to travel by air, if it's still available, make sure that you get an airline that will block a seat so you and your bubble can sit in your area, but the other maybe a seat or there's a cushion between you and another party to make sure that you're staying as close to 6 feet away as possible. I know that that's not going to be possible in every single scenario. When you're looking to travel, know what COVID looks like there, whether it is, you know, we're in the state of Delaware. If you're going to Delaware beaches, if you're going to go to the New Jersey beaches, you know, the Poconos or Florida, COVID transmission is very, very local. If you look at the Delaware Division of Public Health website on COVID, broken down by county and by zip code, it is different. One zip code to another can be significantly different. So know what that looks like before you get there. Maybe it's better than where you're coming from. Maybe it's worse, but you need to know that in order to understand your risk. So getting there is a risk, whether you're driving and if you're going to drive to Florida, it is still 12 hours. You will have to stop and get gas. You will have to interact with others. If you're going to fly, shorter flight, only 2 hours, but you'll be in a can with other people for 2 hours. And that poses a risk. Make sure that you're wearing your mask and washing your hands as much as possible. And then when you get down there, what does that look like? So again, all the hotels, many of the hotels and places that you're going to stay have their COVID protocols. And you can even call and ask them about it and see what it's going to look like once you get down there. Do they require masks? Is it only recommended? Is it something that is enforced really well or not enforced at all? Is it a place that's really designed to have people congregate together. Potentially that's not a very safe place at this point because we just have so much transmission of COVID in our communities. So all of that should kind of inform you, where am I going to go? Can I get there safely? And again, your individual risk. If I am at higher risk, I don't know that I would go to a place that would require me to congregate. But if I'm at lower risk, that's also still not a very safe option. So it really is up to the individual to know their risk and to know what they're getting into.
And what would you say about just driving in the car as a whole? If you were deciding to drive with people from outside of your household, would you recommend everyone wear the masks in the car then as well?
Very much so. So that is definitely less than 6 feet. I can't imagine a car that you'd be able to space 6 feet apart. I don't own one of those. So you're in a small contained environment next to individuals not from your home. Wear that mask. Open the windows if you can. Again, today's probably not that day with 30 degrees outside. But do everything you can to mitigate that risk. I don't think anybody really wants to pass COVID from themselves to anybody else, but they may not know that they're infected yet. And so really, with as much COVID as there is out in the environments, in our communities, understanding that risk is there and mitigating it as much as possible is very, very important.
So I would be a bad bridesmaid if I didn't bring up the COVID bride problem. 2 weddings that I'm bridesmaid in this year, and they're really hoping that in the fall they're able to have, the big wedding that they're planning on. So what are we looking at here? Should I, kind of lead them in the other direction? Are we looking at big weddings making a comeback at all? Or are we really in that micro wedding trend or eloping, really? Some people I've seen as well, trying to get married especially in 2020, but not being able to have that big wedding that they were planning for, years ahead of time.
I think we need a new nickname other than COVID brides. Just
very trendy, Tim. Come on.
Doesn't sit right with me. Maybe it's just the work I do. So I would definitely talk with the bride about, what does their big day look like? And maybe we just call it the big day instead of a big event or large wedding. Sure. By the fall, we didn't know we were going to be here last January. So to project out to the fall, there's probably no way to be able to tell what that's going to look like. But I think the risk factors will still be there for many of us. If it's going to be indoors, limiting the number of individuals in that space will be paramount to your safety. If the transmission looks like it does today, even if it looks like it does in August of last year when we were fairly low, it was still uncomfortable to be in spaces with individuals, even if they were a family, even if it was for a really good cause. You still kind of had that second thought about maybe somebody in here could be infected and not know it and pass it to many of us. And that very scenario played out a number of times. So think about how can I in a safe way that also meets the needs, right? So some people just really want a very specific thing for their wedding. So mitigating all the other risks is probably paramount. So outside, making sure that the planner really thinks about spread of COVID for the event in terms of what are they going to be able to mitigate it. Can we have smaller tables with just your own bubble at that table? Maybe that's a way that we mitigate it, and the tables are nice and spread out. It may take half of the University of Delaware to have a decent sized wedding if we're going to do it that way. But these are the risk factors that we can mitigate if we keep bubbles together, and they only have their mask off when they're eating, eating and drinking at their table, and then they're up and they're doing other things with masks. That's a lower risk than say no mask at all. Outdoors, again, lower risk than indoors. And I don't know that anybody really wants to hear all of this, but these are the things that will keep you safe on your wedding day. So that way it maintains its really happy, joyous feeling, in the 2 weeks after the fact, when all of you, when everybody at the event has been exposed to one another, hopefully in a COVID-free environment.
So I know you don't like the word COVID bride, but I have a feeling 2022 and 2023 are going to be incredibly popular wedding years. If many of these brides do choose to, put it on hold and try to push them more. But so, before I let you go, what about, I would be a bad friend if I did not ask about new babies. I have a few friends who are any day now kind of welcoming some new babies and are asking me to ask you, can they have grandma and grandpa come over? Can they bring the baby, 2 hours to see the other set of family members. What is the smart move here during COVID?
The smart move, especially right now, we don't have enough vaccine to really be considered going back to normal. And even I think during normal times, we limited the number of individuals that saw our newborns. And so I would say, Zoom is your friend as much as possible. Have individuals come up to windows that are closed. Making sure that you get the experience of seeing the newborn, of really interacting, but in a way that maintains your safety. So if you're going to allow an individual into your home or into a space with your newborn, making sure that they have a mask on, making sure that they have that they've not been exposed to COVID in the last 2 weeks. We didn't really talk about this a lot, but if you've been exposed in the last 2 weeks or in the last 10 days and have not tested negative, or if you know that you're positive, stay away from others as best as you possibly can. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that specifically right now when we're talking about newborns, but the making sure that, again, sanitizing hands, masking on, and really limiting the duration of contact as much as possible is the best thing for your baby in general, not just for COVID, but there's a number of things that babies don't like to pick up in the environment, and we'd like to keep that away from them while still maintaining that relationship with our loved ones that want to see our newborns.
Absolutely. We are very lucky that COVID happened in a time of Skype and Zoom and Teams and FaceTime and every other way that we're able to have that connection, because I'm sure that, a lot of people would be in a very different mindset and a very different social setting if we weren't able to connect virtually as well. So if there is at all a silver lining to us still having to deal with this, at least we're able to talk in this way and connect virtually for sure. So Tim, before I let you go, is there anything else you'd like to share with our viewers today?
I'd actually extend that last comment, not just Skype and Zoom. I know we use it a lot for our work, but there's also, the food delivery apps. There is, I know that Peloton is a company that's been very popular because of their ability to kind of interact with individuals that are exercising alone in their home. So if you can take that platform and use it not necessarily just for Peloton, but for however you want to do it, so that way you still get that exercise. You can look at pictures of your dream destination of your spring break that you wanted to take this year, but maybe had second thoughts and potentially stayed home and maybe a little less exposure to COVID, and doing a Zoom wedding. Right, it's possible. I've seen it happen with a really big celebration on the back end of this when it's much safer. All of that, we're able to do so now. So use all the tools at your disposal to still be able to live your life, still be able to find joy, but also do it in a way that maintains your safety. So that's probably the best message. I'm glad you ended. I couldn't figure out a way to tie all that together, but you did it beautifully.
Thank you. So if you're watching and need any more information about how to stay safe, we will post the CDC links in the comments below. The CDC has a lot of great information about these specific situations that we touched on today. And as always, there is more information on ChristianaCare.org. Thank you so much and have a great day.